I'd like to welcome Congressman Levin. Congressman Levin was just telling me that he was there in 1989, and Congressman Levin is a freshman here in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he previously served at Human Rights Watch, where he authored a number of publications on human rights issues in China, and he is leading some legislative initiatives that he will tell you about. Thank you so much, Congressman Levin.
Good afternoon. Actually, I worked for Human Rights Watch in Haiti, but I was in Hong Kong in late May of 1989 when I participated in the biggest demonstration of my life to really joyously, there was so much positive energy as people demanded democracy in China. And then I was in Chengdu in early June, before, during, and after June 4th. And we make a huge mistake 30 years later to call this situation the Tiananmen Massacre when it was a systematic national crackdown against democracy by the Chinese government. But in Chengdu, yes, sir, in Chengdu, I spoke to so many people, students, professors, unemployed young people who were upset about corruption in their government, who were sure that their moment had come when the people of China could participate in self-determination and in their own government. And then I watched, horrified, on the night of June 4th, as the Chinese authorities cracked down. There were 2 days of sort of running battles for control of the streets of the center of Chengdu. I saw too many people beaten and killed. And then I saw people taken away like so many sacks of potatoes with their hands tied behind their back, thrown onto trucks, never to be seen again. And then I was there because I was studying Tibetan. I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan in Tibetan religion and philosophy. And so I went and traveled through the Tibetan areas of Sichuan and Gansu province, areas the Chinese government doesn't even call Tibet, but there are large parts of Qinghai and Gansu and Sichuan provinces that are really Tibetan areas. The Dalai Lama himself is not from the Tibet Autonomous Region. And I went to the Labrang Monastery, and a monk there, when he found I could speak Tibetan, they pulled me into their little cell where they lived, their room. And they said they show us off, the happy monks, but we're really not free to practice our religion. We're not free to do research. We don't have half the number of monks that we used to have. And he pulled out of a crack in the wall of his room some little slogans, and he gave them to me. And today they hang in my office in the U.S. House of Representatives. He never could have imagined. He said, "Go tell the world our story, that the Tibetan people just wanted some self-determination." And so what are we to make today, 30 years later? It would be easy to get depressed. China, the very definition of an authoritarian state, with mass surveillance down into the everyday life of people. 1 million or more Uyghurs and Kazakhs and others languishing in forced labor camps. Tibetan culture and other cultures endangered altogether. But you know, in my Jewish tradition, one of the most famous sayings is that you don't have to complete the task, but you must work on to fight against injustice. And I would just like to ask you to think on this 30th anniversary, what would African Americans have thought in the 1870s as laws were passed in the new Jim Crow era, taking away their basic rights just a few years after the Civil War. What would South Africans think in 1962 when Nelson Mandela was taken off to prison for life? People kept struggling. It was 90 years before we passed the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act in the United States. And we have so much more to do. It was 28 years before Nelson Mandela walked out of prison, and one more year before he became president of South Africa. We don't know what the future holds for China, but we know one thing for sure. We are going to fight until our dying breath so that all the people in China and around the world can obtain their full human rights and their place as global citizens, creating a common future for all of humanity. Thank you so much for coming out, and keep on fighting.